I'm Richard Parfitt, the Marketing Director at iVentiv, and we're going to try something a little bit different today. You may have seen on our Insight series on our YouTube channel and on our website where Kristy, Hannah or I will speak to a global head of learning or talent and talk to them about their work and share that with you via our channels. But today we're going to have a go at just talking to each other. If you're new to iVentiv, we run executive knowledge exchanges all over the world for global heads of learning, talent, and executive development. And in the process of doing that, we're often asked, what are you hearing elsewhere? What are different companies doing around all these different topics? How do things vary in different parts of the world? And we're trying to do more and more to share those insights with you. So we'll soon be releasing our 4th annual iVentiv Pulse report, which you'll be able to download for free from our website. And today we're going to share some of our predictions for what we think we might see as dominant topics in the learning conversation in 2026. Now, we are not per se learning experts. We're not going to be sharing our deep knowledge of what you should be doing in a learning organization, but we do talk to a lot of people who are experts and we get to eavesdrop on all of their conversations, and we're always really inspired by the work that they're doing in their organization. So we're going to try and share some of that with you today, share some of the insights that we've gathered from listening to all of those different people and all those different conversations. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Kristy Kitson, who is our L&D Strategist, and by Hannah Hoey, our Content Manager. Hannah and Kristy are the masterminds behind every iVentiv agenda, every iVentiv event they speak to. Between them, every single speaker, every single facilitator and chair at our events. And so they get to listen in on a lot of these conversations and hear about what the dominant topics are for global heads of learning and talent. So we're going to try, like I said, to get some of that across to you today. But Hannah and Kristy, thank you both for joining me in this mad experiment of mine. We do have a little bit of form in this, Kristy, because we were talking around this time last year about the idea of introducing a buzzword into the conversation to get people worried that they were missing out on the latest thing. And the idea we came up with was de-skilling, sort of combining reskilling, upskilling, unlearning, this idea of unlearning old habits to actually just completely forgetting how to do something altogether and de-skilling. And lo and behold, we actually saw that appearing in marketing copy in 2025. So we have some form to fall back on. But the way this is going to work is we're each going to share a little prediction of what we think we can expect in 2026. And then at the end of the year, we can laugh at ourselves by just how far off we were. So this is a brand new experiment for us. You can't see the other side of the camera, but the room is covered in tripods and cameras and microphones and everything. It's a bit of a mad setup. So if it all goes horribly wrong, please forgive us. If you end up looking at my feed for 10 minutes of the conversation, then, like I say, please forgive us. Equally, if you enjoy what you see, then please let us know, and we'll potentially do more of this content if I can persuade Hannah and Kristy to join me in doing so. So, like I said, we're each going to share a prediction, and I think there's been some intense negotiations going on before we started recording. And Kristy, you're gonna kick us off.
I believe I am. So yes, thanks for that, Richard. And I am thrilled to see just how wrong we all are at the end of next year. Although we were right about the unskilling piece, so I think that's interesting. So the thing that's really most interesting to me in pulling together the pre-event data, in having the conversations, is the learning culture piece. So I know there's some big hitters that are always, like, they're perennially at the top of our data set. So, you know, leadership and exec development, AI, and the skilling piece. And those are fascinating conversations, but I'm a little bit obsessed with the learning culture piece, and of course I am. I know quite often the team talk about me as the learning geek, and I'm really happy to be that, but this really is something that's interesting to me. So I'm going to caveat my prediction with some data, because that's how I'd like to approach it. But so if we start with the data, last year I think it was somewhere around 40% of respondents were telling us that learning culture was top of mind for them when they came to join us at our exchanges. This year it's 50, or nearly 50. And I think when I started at iVentiv at the end of 2023, it was around 25%. So it's really seen quite a big leap up. And I think that's very interesting when we think about the other conversations that are happening around it. So obviously, learning culture, it's a perennial concern for learning and development professionals. Of course it is. Anyone who takes a pedagogical approach to anything in life is going to think about the culture that's happening in. But the progression that we've seen in the conversation recently, I think, is where my prediction comes from. So my prediction is, and it's something that I'm really excited about, is that L&D as the people development experts are going to be more important than ever in 2026. I think this is because they'll be moving more into the organizational design space, if not the organizational excellence space, certainly, and continuing to be the true architects of the future of work. So that's my prediction. I think L&D are finally going to move from begging for a seat at the table to, really, I don't know, building the table, designing the table, inviting the guests, whatever you want it to be. I think that's my prediction. And I think we see this come through in the pre-event conversations we have as a group. So when we ask our participants, those really top level questions, that first one about the things that are impacting business operations, the external influences impacting business operations, it's been a fascinating year in that regard. If we think about geopolitics and climate and AI technology, everything that's happening, I think it's probably to be expected that that's one of the more dynamic conversations we have. And I think learning really or people development stepping more into the design of the organization, how things really kind of come together and how things happen, I think is what will give organizations the agility that they need to meet those challenges head on. So we were in London recently, and that's the first time I've been with Nigel Payne at an exchange since 2023, which was great to kind of see him discuss more. So obviously he looks a lot at organizational learning and how an organization turns into a learning organization. And I think the responses that we had from the participants in the room really spoke to that idea that this is the new organizational design. This is how organizations that use people data as their currency, skills data as their currency, are going to be the ones that are successful. I think that really kind of bears out what we're seeing in terms of the prominence and the importance of the people development function in this kind of complex world. And 2026, we can hope, in a lot of regards, is less complex, but I'm certain it won't be.
Kristy, can I ask, I feel like my role should be to ask the stupid questions here. So why should L&D be doing this? There's all sorts of different parts of the business that are involved in the future of work conversation and the organizational design conversation. Why are L&D professionals well placed to do this? Do they want to be doing this?
I think so. To answer the second part first, I think, do they want to be? Absolutely. I think every person who moves into the people development space is really passionate about developing people, of course, but then you extrapolate that out, developing, building, growing the organization, improving performance. We have a lot of people who position learning as a performance enabler, performance driver, and I think that's really fantastic. So definitely there's the appetite there to do it. Should they be doing it? I think AI might be the place where we've seen that learning can do it. So when we design our conversations for our collab cafe questions, for example, and when we hear those play out at exchanges, L&D has been, an ED and talent management, even with the skills mapping element, has really been instrumental in moving organizations from experimentation with AI to enterprise-wide impact. There was that tussle that we had probably towards the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. Should this be IT? Should it be L&D? And actually it was like, let's bring people together. Oh, that's where thinking differently about the structure of the organization kind of comes into play, I think.
You mentioned, we should have a swear jar for mentioning AI somewhere in the room, shouldn't we? But when it comes to AI, I've heard you and Hannah both talk about this idea of AI agents starting to appear on the org chart in a lot of organizations. And so does that form part of this, that we're no longer just talking about developing people, but about the agents in between those people who are forming part of the work?
That's it, exactly. And I think that's a really fascinating conversation, because if you take how that plays out in our exec development sessions as an example, we're having to now upskill leaders in leading teams that are blended, not blended at home and in the office, but blended AI and human. And it's really interesting how I read a meta study on the development of skills around AI this year, and it's interesting that the skills that are foregrounded are the human skills, what would have been historically called the soft skills or power skills, or however you think about those, but the empathy piece, and that plays out across all three of our sessions, certainly of our different topics. But in exec development is where I really think the rubber meets the road in terms of, okay, the organisation looks different now. Firstly, how are we getting our leaders up to speed with doing the do in that situation? Yeah.
And I think you asked the question of, should this sit with learning leaders, or why does it sit there? And I think it's one of those frustrating conversations where you can have meeting after meeting of like, this shouldn't just sit in learning in a silo. This should be across the business. And you're like, yes, of course it is, but it has to be somewhere to get that ball rolling. And I think it speaks to have a lowercase l, lowercase c learning culture. You have to have a uppercase L, uppercase C learning culture initiatives. Charles Jennings talks about this a lot, that a lot of investment can be in the formal learning piece, and what you're really trying to create is an informal learning piece. And I think that speaks to no matter what it is, because we're talking about AI now, and I can imagine if you do convince us to do this next year, it will be something completely different. And so, it could be halfway through the year, there'll be something. What you always need to be is responsive and agile to whatever change that might be, and that can be at a technological level, it can be at a societal, political, personal level. There can be huge upheavals. If you don't have an organisation or people in it that are willing to adapt and learn and change and have the capacity to do that, then you are only running operations that can very quickly become redundant. And so, I think you need to get a lowercase l, lowercase c, you need a uppercase L, uppercase C, which just leave it with put it with learning, because it's an easier, and it means you'll leave a meeting with a resolution. Right, the CLO is going to come back to me with a learning culture. At least the conversation's there and is moving, and everyone that knows it knows that it's more than that, and you need buy-in, and you need to collaborate with other functions, and people need to want it. But I think it's a real opportunity for the people that we're speaking with, learning leaders, is to really attribute, dare I say, the ROI of what that is if you can say, it might not be that we had this many people do this course and they completed that and it changed, but if it's like you saw your workforce within the space of 2 years, ChatGPT or OpenAI was November 2022, and I couldn't believe that was, I was like, oh no, it's maybe 2020 or something, but it's a relatively short period of time that we are already talking about not just an LLM, but then I've got a co-pilot, I've got an agent, I've got a digital workforce. Even the capacity to talk about it shows that you need to build learners and not learning. Yeah. And that is what I think people are trying to get to.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely agree. It's that piece where you can trust the people development to move it from a value on a wall to really creating business value. And I think, to your point earlier, I think they really have the appetite to do that as well, which is why this is an exciting thing for me to kind of consider.
And to the data point as well, and I should say, if the numbers are slightly different in the published report, then they will be that one. That's going to be checked and down to the exact percentage. But just more generally speaking, future of work as a prompted topic is up. I think it's 42% year on year since last year of what our learning leaders are saying. This is a priority for me. And now, whereas they might have thought, oh, that sits in strategic workforce planning, that sits in talent, it is very much on the focus of we will be responsible, or we will be, a key lever in designing what that looks like, or even part of a conversation of trying to think what that might possibly look like. And it's is it the old adage of you give someone a fishing rod versus giving them a fish? Like, you need to build people that can adapt and can change and are malleable. And to that extent, you need an organisation that has the capacity to do that as well, which links into that. It's not, you can't just change your people, you have to change the structures, the governance, the leadership, the strategy, so that there is that flex. It's like building a bridge, right? A bridge has to be able to swing to a certain extent, right? You can't just build a rigid bridge and that will get us there. Absolutely. You need to be able to build in that flex.
So from building tables to building bridges at the end, I'm concerned now, because I feel like that's a really good start and a really good prediction, and now Hannah and I have to follow you. So you touched on the skills piece, so maybe I'll jump in with mine. So my prediction for 2026 is that skills-based approaches and skills-based organizations will go from being the latest buzzword to accepted best practice. And the reason I'm saying that is the whole skills-based conversation where work is assigned based on the skills that individuals have rather than on the job roles that they have and the confines of those feels really familiar to us in a small business, right? Because things come up in a small business and it's just got who can do this, who's got the time for one thing, who's got the skill to get on this, and we don't particularly worry about whether it falls under somebody's remit or job title or not. And when I think back to, I think it was November 2023 when we were in London at Shell and we were having the conversation about skills-based organisations, and there was a full-blown argument between two delegates about whether we were just doing competencies over again, and they had a kind of impromptu breakout session on lunch, and there was a flip chart and there were pens and there was gesticulation. It was amazing. From that to then this year, seeing how the conversation has moved from how do you get started with skills-based approaches, we've seen a lot of people doing the kind of skills mapping part and then wondering about where they go next, to really thinking about what is that next step. And when we were in New York in October this year, we had this conversation in the Club Cafe about what's next for skills-based organizations, and the group reported back that there was a bit of a disagreement within the group about whether we should be thinking about what's next or whether some people are just getting started. So the prediction that I'm making is that part about how do we get started will sort of start to be a moot point for most large organizations, because they will be moving down that road. I feel like I hear less people just shrugging and saying, oh, this is just the same thing with a different name, and actually it seems like they're running with it more. I throw that for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think to reference when let's make unskilling or de-skilling happen, that analogy, when we saw that actually become a thing, it was when we were working with Microsoft ahead of their Cologne exchange. And obviously we'd been with Microsoft in Atlanta earlier in the year, this year. And to hear the people really doing the work have the conversation, it made perfect sense, because if you think about taking that approach, and everyone has dipped a toe, or most people have dipped a toe and taken some sort of strides towards the skills-based approach, I think what's undeniable is having a whole a completely different view on the future of work and how work is assigned and everything else is necessary because of the drastic shifts. But also it's possible because of AI, because of what that enables in terms of skills mapping and things like that. So I think not exploring anything, I think will be in that space will be a moot point. But the conversation we were having, in which I heard the phrase unskilling, it was very much, and you hear different versions of it, so sunsetting skills and things like that. It was around the mindset piece. So it was like, how do you bring the stakeholders and the workforce with you in taking that approach, that whole new approach to things? So how do you get them comfortable with, I think the phrase they used was letting go. So how do you get people comfortable with letting go of skills that they've held so tightly to, and things that have got them from A to B in the past and have earned them a certain amount of success? And how do you get them? So it was Microsoft. So obviously Microsoft are really at and they're working. I know, for example, in Germany, they're working a lot with the AI Skilling Alliance to think, how do we do this on an enterprise-wide level? How do we get people comfortable with letting go so that they create the space, to use Nigel Payne's term around organisational learning, so that they create the space for those new skills. And so that's kind of how it happens. So I think, I mean, I agree with your prediction. So congratulations to you again. If that's
and I4CP also had a similar prediction. So if we're on track with I4CP's predictions, then we should be in line with that.
Wonderful, thank you, I4CP. But I mean, because there's huge tech stacks behind this skills-based approach now. We talk about the skills mapping, that's kind of the bit that jumps out, but there's then integrations with the learning platform, with the HR platform, and there's multiple platforms going into it, and a lot of money.
Yeah. If I could just come back to the previous point though, and it just reminded me of a conversation I had at the end of last week with a global L&D leader of large organisation, over 500,000 employees, a well-recognised brand, and we were talking a little bit about this, and and it was a really nice conversation, and it became a very informal one. And we were saying the thing is, you need to make it real for the everyday person, and that is much bigger than you. At the moment, I think we've convinced, or we are now, we are all in agreement that a skills-based approach, or however you define it, a way of looking at your organisation and your workforce in that way makes sense at the organisational level. But the piece now that's missing, and you touched on it a bit there with your stakeholders, is it also now needs to make sense for every single person you want to come along on that journey. And so it can't just feel like another corporate buzzword, another system that I have to go in and characterise it. It needs to be a way that you think about yourself. And I think that if it is going to have the impact that it could have, it actually means engaging at a much broader level with governments, with the education system. If we start talking to people as you need to think about the skills that you're coming to the workforce is, and not that you arrive on day one in a new job with maybe they don't have briefcases anymore, but saying, oh, what you thought you were building towards, we're going to now categorize in a different way in skills. And we're seeing it with many countries. I believe Singapore have had a skills future government set up, and they've been using that terminology. But I think if we want people to come along with it, it needs to exist outside of the latest newsletter to log in and say you need to update your skills on your profile, and like, great, well, I've also updated it on my resume, and I've also put it on my LinkedIn, and I also, if my friend asks me, can I do that, I say, yeah, I'm capable of doing that. It just needs to become part of the more general lexicon of how people are talking and how the workforce itself is talking, if it is going to hold weight and going to have the impact that it could, rather than siloed impact in each individual organisation.
And is that representative of the conversations you're having on this topic now? I talk about what I've overheard at a few events. You speak to more people than I do, and has that skepticism about skills-based approaches started to fade away and people jumping on board with it? That's two thoughtful expressions.
I think as well, there will always be, if we're having an AI swear jar, there will always be is the juice worth the squeeze conversation around any seismic change. With the organisations and the people that we're talking to, it is not, okay, we need to roll this out to 25 people. It is, to your point, it is a huge tech stack. It is multi-million pounds worth of changes. It is, average of 60,000 employees, maybe upwards of that you are trying to change, and you are changing 5-year strategies. These are huge behemoths to move. And so I think there will always be a conversation of, are we switching this out for another word that we're going to use in 2 weeks' time or 2 years' time? Are we investing are we launching a new marketing campaign that we're just going to have to redesign with a new word in 2 years and get people to start talking on the language of that business?
It keeps marketing people involved.
But I think it's like, it's coming back to what is the actual change that you're trying to make? How are you trying to get people to think about themselves? And that is a societal change rather than a individual corporate change.
And I think actually, to your point about is everyone kind of there, where we've had examples of people pull back from taking the skills-based approach. So I think about some of the conversations that we had with the learning leaders ahead of their joining us on the West Coast, so in LA, and also earlier in the year in Foster City, where people had pulled back. It wasn't because the approach wasn't right, and it wasn't even necessarily because of the expense of the thing or anything else. I mean, it was in part, but it was more, what I heard from a number of people actually was, have we defined the problem we're trying to solve with taking this approach before leaping in? Because if not, we're not starting from the right place. We don't have a roadmap that's going to make any kind of sense. And I think you're absolutely right. It's the juice worth the squeeze piece, but also being very specifically targeted. And I mean, just to your point about it's an educational approach, and it's a systematic approach, and something that governments are involved in. I mean, back when I was teaching, there was constantly push and pull. Should the curriculum for the UK, should it be skills based? Should it be knowledge based? Should it be a blend of both? And now and that was before AI was really a thing. And I think now that's more than just a theoretical question. We really need to be we need to be interrogating the approaches we're taking to things, because technology can do so much more for us, obviously, to make a really obvious point, than it ever did. So we'd be fools to not ask that question.
And I think as well, I always like to come, if I find myself getting into the weeds too much on a conversation, I think, like, let's call a spade a spade. What are you trying to do? You are trying to deliver outcomes better, quicker, more efficient. There is a goal that you have in mind, and so you need to make it make sense for that goal.
Yeah.
So, and what we're seeing now, and I've been a lot of our events this year, is there are people that are very far along or relatively far along on the skills journey, and they are sitting on a gold mine of data and indices, and they have so much. And now, to your point about, do they know what problem they're trying to solve for? It's like they have this huge breadth of data, and it's where are we applying it and why? And if the data says that we actually are underskilled, it's really, you have to confront the reality of what that data has shown you. And I think that is the challenge, is that as people get more and more into this conversation, is really the reality of what the bigger picture is, which is we have more significant gaps than we thought we did. We need to anticipate bigger change than perhaps we ever thought we could.
I think you had some interesting conversations around this at the Talent Management Exchange in Zurich, right? I think specifically around that, where people were having that exact kind of aha moment in terms of where they are themselves, and that's why I flip between which of our kind of strings is my favorite, but I always forget, because we don't do as many talent management conversations across the year, and then when you engage with the people who are in that space, you forget the cliff face that they're at, and you forget what they're immediately confronted with in that space. And I was really fascinated to read some of the outputs of that in terms of people challenging things in a different way, thinking differently about, if skills is your currency, great, but then what does that mean for the design of your organization, for your kind of day-to-day execution, those kind of things.
And actually the line that we kept coming back to at that session in May was how to ensure that the talent you have remains the talent that you need, or develops into the talent that you will need. And you said you can, if skills is your currency, you can fall into the trap of, okay, we're going to use this as our currency, now we're going to use this as our currency, and it's like, what are you spending it on? Or like, what do you, that's great, but like, what is your credit? What is your deficit? What do you need to buy? Or not to get into that one, but it's a lot of talk. And I think that's really why we're trying to push the agendas, because there is the operational side of it of, okay, these are all the business goals and strategies and deliverables that we need to achieve. And our event should be a place where people that need to do those incremental changes to get there should be able to talk about that, but also bringing in the bigger picture of, so that's why we love to bring in external business leaders, which is, I'm going to talk to you in a way that is not the language that you want me to talk about. I'm not going to have the right keywords or the buzzwords. I'm going to tell you what I need when, and really putting, taking in conversations out of the echo chamber that they can sometimes be, and having a real discussion about the business.
So thank you for adding so much detail to my prediction. It made it sound much more convincing. So thank you both. And then Hannah, on to you for your.
So I have racked my brains trying to articulate a nice, neat sentence or prediction around this, but I think as nebulous as the conversation is, my prediction will be as nebulous. And that is around the AI piece. I think the conversation will become less of what are you doing with AI and what should we be doing with AI, which it has already, it is how people have already been talking, but I think the implications are much bigger than that now. So we've been around the track a couple of laps now. So it was like, great, we can do this with AI. AI can do this. We can automate this. We can do this. We can do this. And there was a couple of years there. It was like, great, do that, do it. And what ended up happening was, if you lay a new tech on an old process without looking at if that process is still fit for purpose, what you've done is made a redundant process more efficient. And that, I think, was happening a little bit. Now we've been around the track a few times and we're like, great, AI can write all of these things for me. And in the beginning, it was fantastic and great. And now you read it and you're like, AI wrote that and I hate that. I would love just to get an email from someone that says, how was Barcelona? What are the kids off to college? You want something that has that personalization. So it's now not just what AI can do, but what should AI do? And how do we make sure that when we are bringing AI into enterprise integration, but how are we still building responsible decision making, responsible strategic thinkers that have the capacity to think around a problem, that also have the tools now to offload and automate day-to-day tasks that weren't as edifying, perhaps, and focus in on, are we still refining the skills that we need? And I think also that will open a conversation around governance.
Yeah. And
it's no longer just what can AI do from a legal perspective, but what should it be doing? Mm-hmm. What is, I'm hesitant to use the word like morally should it be doing, or ethically, because you get into a bit of the weeds on that. But it's more, what do you actually want it to do? What do you want AI to be doing? How can you make it do that? And I think the piece at the moment is there's been a lot of focus in how do we make AI up to speed on all of those things, that we're actually lacking a little bit on, to your first point around the human skills, the power skills, the soft skills. How do we make sure that they keep pace in a world where you will now have to manage a hybrid team, where you will have to still be a critical thinker, still approach things with discernment. And AI as a topic is up 46% year on year from last year, is what people are thinking about. And I think for learning leaders, there is the fork in the road of what can AI do for the organisation, and how are we responsible for upskilling organisation or bringing organisational learning along with AI, and how are we responsible for personal learning, individual learning, and bringing them along on the story of AI. So all that to say, I think my prediction is that I think the conversation will take on so many more nuances that I am really excited to hear.
Yeah. I think it's no, I completely agree. And we've been hearing a lot that would speak to that from, it's really interesting when you look at the conversations and you take them as a whole, and as much as our community of global heads of learning, you can feel and you can see differences sometimes in, organizations headquartered in Europe and those headquartered in the US, and the different approaches that they would take to something like governance with AI. And obviously individual countries have their own implications in that space now. But something that I thought was interesting ahead of, again, it was on one of our pre-event alignment calls ahead of our Los Angeles exchange. Now we had folks on there from the East Coast, from New York, and from the UK in London, and we had a number of learning leaders from tech organisations say what we've noticed recently is we're spending a significantly, a higher proportion of our time quality assuring the output of AI that we weren't expecting to be doing. None of our modelling suggested that we would be doing this at this point, and we're spending so much more time doing that than we ever did with the engineers producing it in the first place. So what's gone wrong? What leap have we taken too soon, and where do we need to pull back on this? So I think you're right. I think the nuance is exactly right. The conversation will develop in that space.
Similar to what we were just saying about skills, that if you start by saying let's do a skills-based approach and then we'll work out what problem we can actually solve with it afterwards, then those are the people who are running into trouble. Whereas if you have a problem that you're trying to solve and you're applying AI to it, then that's the correct way around.
Yeah. And so perhaps my prediction is that the question is no longer going to be, can AI do that? And it's going to be, if AI is going to be doing that, what is the human going to be doing instead of that? And really focusing in on that of, seeing it not as this has taken all of these roles from people, and it's more, it has freed up time. How do you make sure that if it's freed up time for more of that, strategic thinking, how are they still getting to the level where they can effectively strategically think?
Yeah,
and without those tasks that build, your bank
Absolutely.
of knowledge that give you that sort of a credit.
Because we've had people join us say that AI has completely turned their approach to, the apprenticeship, as an example, as a way to build talent. It's completely turned it on its head, because so many of those entry-level tasks are automated now. We're hearing this across the board. We're hearing it in Europe, in the US, and in various different industries. And so they're saying now that almost you have to think about your entry-level roles as a more traditional apprentice. If you took like a carpentry or something that was, very, very, very different. If you take that kind of approach where you're not expecting your entry-level individuals to be producing value that is above and beyond what AI is doing for those tasks, but you need them to, take meeting minutes to learn how the people who in strategic positions are thinking and are reasoning things out. So they're not producing any value for you, but the period of time in which that's potentially true is probably going to be a bit longer, because they have to almost get to where those automated situations are with AI. And we have lots of people talk about, of course, learning. We're very quick to, and I'm very proud of learning for this, very quick to say that's our time. If AI is freeing up this amount of time among this portion of the workforce, we'll take that for skilling, for whatever else, for developing. So I think you're right. That's a really, what is the human going to be doing is going to be the differentiator as well. A lot of people I know are saying that when they're joining us, they're like, we're realizing more and more that what our humans are doing in the space of like empathy and strategic thinking and creative thinking is going to be our differentiator.
And I think as well the conversation, because I think AI as a tool, as a conversation, will have diffused across the organisation. It won't necessarily be a chief AI officer's responsibility or a specific department. It will become, as it has been, it's a tool that everyone has access to and everyone uses, in the same way that we all have calculators in a maths class, but we still want to learn how to count to 10, or the same way that we now all have computers with cloud computing, but it is still valuable to have to do the work. And as AI becomes more across the organisation, we will look at, okay, we've all now leveled up with this tool, and so what is next with that?
And I asked Kristy this question about her prediction earlier, but if it is so diffused across the organisation, why L&D? Why should L&D be taking the mantle when it comes to topics like governance?
So I think if you look at governance and kind of AI, governance is the element of AI where it stops being a technology and it becomes an organizational issue, right? That's where it touches on every other element of the organization, the legal, the human, the HR aspect, and obviously tech and everything else. So that, I think, is potentially one reason that it sits with learning, or it sits with people development, because the governance piece is the piece that makes it more than technology, I suppose. I don't know if that's too,
I think that makes a lot of sense.
And I think it goes back to maybe that fork in the road, which is how is the organisation learning and developing with AI, and there is a governance piece around that. And then one thing I think we'll definitely see arise is a question around, with digital twins, who owns the IP of digital twins? How much can you put a digital twin to work? Are you going to have to put hours around and parameters around how much digital twin can work? Otherwise it will look like Hannah has done this many hours of work and against someone else that hasn't, and so can I be compensated? Can I be compensated for
exactly?
Can I put overtime against my digital twin?
That guardrail, very much. If you think about that sounds very much like HR, doesn't it? It's an HR guardrail. If you think about it in a different way. So
and there's the understanding of what governance will be from an organisational perspective, and then there is, if Hannah as an individual has learned and developed to have a digital twin, to have an AI toolkit, how much is that also my asset? My usage of AI is my asset, and how I have developed. And I think learning and where the learning and development intervention is, it's building people to become that version of themselves, and the AI version of themselves. And you won't get there without the learning person.
The look of fear on mine and Kristy's faces when
I
you
mean,
see the AI versions of ourselves.
Absolutely. To finish on a theoretical note, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's all have an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Maybe our AI agents can, our digital twins will do the predictions next year.
Yeah, we'll do that.
We'll do that.
Fantastic. Well, look, as I said at the start, thank you both for joining me in this mad experiment, and hopefully, if you've watched, you've enjoyed watching. And we will hopefully see you in 2026 as well. So if you're ahead of learning, you've not been to an iVentiv event before, just go to iVentiv.com. We run them all over the world. We'd love to see you there. Do download our iVentiv Pulse report as well to see some of the data that may or may not back up the amount of things that we've said in the course of this session. Hannah and Kristy, thank you very much again. And I look forward to seeing just how wrong we are at the end of the year.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks so much, Richard.